All right, good evening, everybody. My name is John Grorud. I work for a company called Social Text, and I work out of our London office, but our head office is based in Silicon Valley. So I'm here to talk about enterprise social networking, or social business software, or Enterprise 2.0. So there's a lot of names for it. We actually predate the term Enterprise 2.0 by a few years. So we were the first Enterprise 2.0 company actually coming out with an enterprise wiki back in 2003. So let me just do a popular poll of the audience here before we start. So how many of you have a Facebook account? Okay, that's almost everybody. And how many of you have a Twitter account? Okay. How many of you work for organizations that are actually using some social networking technology or some collaboration platform today? That's also a good number of you. How many of you use SharePoint as part of that social networking strategy? Okay. And out of those people, how many of you believe that SharePoint offers all the answers? Okay, good. So, we've been in this space for a long time, and obviously Enterprise 2.0, the lazy version of, the lazy definition of Enterprise 2.0 is to say it's the enterprise versions of these Web 2.0 services that I think we've all seen how they have profoundly and enormously changed the way people around the world are actually interacting with each other, how they're communicating, how they find each other, how they share things with each other. So in the enterprise world, things are, of course, taking a little longer. But what we're seeing over the last decade, actually, and certainly that's a trend that has been gathering speed over the last few years, we're seeing that more and more companies are moving away from very static corporate directories to social networks within the enterprise. And the metaphor on the consumer web will be Facebook and LinkedIn, those kind of services. We also see that email is, and will continue to be a very important means of communication in the enterprise. We're seeing how social messaging, things like microblogging, is actually taking over very rapidly. And it's already done so on the consumer web, where microblogging and social messaging and social networking has taken over as the primary means for people to communicate with their social graph. Even a person like Bill Gates, who certainly have a lot of vested interest in making sure that people are continuing to use email and emailing back and forth Microsoft Office documents for the foreseeable future. He, to his credit, said actually a couple of years ago that social messaging and microblogging is bound to overtake email within organizations, within corporations, as the primary means of communication. And then we also have, of course, application silos within organizations. People come into the work and then they have a lot of different applications that they need to access in order to be able to do their work. So we see more and more organizations moving towards dashboards, where you have one view of all the systems and services that you need to access in order to get your job done. Also, there's certainly been, and this has probably been the trend on this slide that has been there for the longest, is people actually recognizing that it's very cumbersome to work with Microsoft Office documents and emailing those back and forth, and instead moving to shared virtual workspaces, things like wikis and blogs, where they can more easily collaborate with their colleagues. So, and again, the metaphors on the consumer web will be on the side there, and those are, as I mentioned, certainly a good decade now where these have been services that have really taken over the way people actually interact and communicate with each other. So, we at Social Text, we have had a customer success team that have had 7 or 8 years of practice development, and we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of enterprise clients and helping them to improve collaboration, improve knowledge sharing. And some of those trends that we've seen, and this has of course also guided our product development over the last 8 or 9 years, is we see certain trends and we see what people really need to use our collaboration platform for. So we've arrived at the 4 broad solution areas. So at one level, it's maybe at a high level, it's just to give your colleagues a better way to communicate and collaborate, a better way to share knowledge inside the organization. So talking about things like you give people a proper dynamic profile page where they can tag themselves with expertise they have, they can follow colleagues, they can organize themselves into groups. Give people an ability to communicate via microblogging. It certainly opens up communication inside the organization rather than very closed email conversations. Another very strong trend that we've seen is, of course, organizations have lots and lots of investments in their intranets and spent millions, in many instances, spent millions on creating an intranet. And then they come to us and they say that that intranet is very poor, it has very outdated information, it's impossible for people to find the information, even if it was there. And it's just very static, and people typically don't visit the intranet after their induction. So they come to us, but of course we've also recognized that it can get a little sensitive, so we don't want to come in there and say, well, you can use our platform and actually replace the existing intranet, and instead we want to work with whatever investments that the organizations have done already. So very often we add some social collaboration tools, some social features, if you will, to an already existing intranet. Very often we also end up actually replacing that intranet 1.0, and we're creating a new social dynamic intranet, which consists of all these different social collaboration tools, these Enterprise 2.0 tools. Then another thing that we've seen is typically there would be lines of business managers that would come to us, maybe head of sales or head of marketing, head of customer support, and they would come to us and they would say, look, we really need to fix the way we share knowledge in my department. It's very inefficient, we're reinventing the wheel all the time. So, and we've asked IT is absolutely bogged down with budget cuts and they can't deliver something. So I know that you guys can deliver everything in the cloud, so can we do something that's up and running quickly, and it helps us very quickly. So those 3 business departments has typically been departments where we've initially started, if you will. What we've seen now is that when the industry has been maturing, is to actually go more broadly across the organization. So it's not just marketing and sales and customer support that can benefit from these kinds of technologies. Now, the 4th solution area is what you might call social extranets or private business communities, private external business communities. So, and a lot of the companies that come to us, and very often they would be, at least if you go back a few years ago, the ones that were early adopters would be organizations within professional services, in advertising world, very forward-leaning organizations that wanted to do something fairly radical, if you will. And they always said to us that a lot of our success longer term is based on how much more efficient we can link up with our business partners, our partner ecosystem, or our key clients. So that's another area that we do. There was a question from over here around social media and engagement. That's not really part of what Socialtext does. We do have an integration with like Radian6, which is a leading platform for social media engagement, social media tracking. But we're very focused on internal collaboration and also in private social extranets. Okay, so there's one more thing I would like to talk to you about, and it's what we call the social layer, and that's really part and parcel of Socialtext strategy. So I mentioned earlier around application silos that most, certainly large organizations and also mid-sized organizations will have a lot of different applications and systems, ERP systems, CRM systems, HR systems. And there's certainly organizational silos, but there's also application silos where those people that have access to those systems, they will be able to work between themselves using those systems. But there's certainly a challenge to be able to collaborate across those application silos, across those organizational silos. So we believe in using a social layer to integrate these different systems and services that organizations are running. So, you know, social software has been such a buzzword for certainly for the last 5 years. So, of course, what would happen would be that all the big vendors are jumping on the social bandwagon. So you have SAP coming out with social features in SAP, and then you have Oracle coming out with social features in their Oracle applications. You have Salesforce.com launching Chatter and their social features. So, you know, you will create a lot better usability of those systems, and maybe you'll have warm, fuzzy salespeople that can now collaborate much easier between themselves, and you have warm, fuzzy marketing people that can collaborate more easily with their marketing systems. But again, that doesn't address the problem of, you know, if you work in customer support, there might be something that happens within the ERP system that could have very big use for the way you go about and actually servicing your customer. So what we believe is that social should not be a feature, and it's no good to just add social capabilities, whether that's microblogging or social networking, onto each of those applications, but instead create a social layer. And that's illustrated on the right side of that slide when you have different systems at the top there, and then you have business processes, people, content, and events. And so I'm not going to go into any technical details around how we actually create that social layer, but all I'm going to say is that we use open web standards, things like REST API, open social, webhooks. So we've always been very committed to the open web. So that allows us to hook into these other systems. So there's chiefly two ways that we create a social layer in the enterprise. So if you think of your Facebook activity stream and how you see what all your network, your social graph is up to, you might also see, for instance, that a friend of yours liked a video on YouTube. Now that gets displayed in your Facebook activity stream. And this is what we do at SocialText for many of our clients. And again, it's really our strategy, and it's the way we believe that the enterprise social software market is going, is where we can take, using these architecture components that we have, and actually hook in to the CRM system, to the ERP system, to the HR, hook into SharePoint, and then display activities and status updates and events that are happening in those systems into one consolidated enterprise activity stream, as you see illustrated here. So not only are you seeing that those events get displayed out to people, and it obviously allows for a very seamless dissipation of events and important events in the enterprise, but it also creates those events into a social object. So here you, for instance, see someone called Joseph Hines is uploading a new presentation to your SharePoint library. Now that gets automatically injected into, that event gets automatically injected into the activity stream. Now you decide, of course, whether that's an event that should be broadcast very broadly or just broadcast to a smaller group. And then now you can have a conversation. People can respond to that and say, okay, you know, is this the presentation that we should also be using for clients in the automotive industry? So that's what we mean when we're saying that we're also creating that event into a social object. So that's the first way that we create a social layer within the enterprise. The second way we do that is that you have a dashboard where we have widgets, similar to, if you're familiar with iGoogle or NetVibes, where you have different widgets where you can have access to all sorts of different systems in one view. So, and again, we're using open standards, open APIs to allow you to hook into those other systems and create events. Or create one view for your employees.